Welcome to Dan's Talks. My guest today is Ken Wyse, who's a trustee at Guildhall and has had the position there that he holds as head of the Development and Events Committee, which is a very important part of things since Guildhall just spent a year and a half or 2 years being modified, restored, and refurbished. Uh, why was that considered necessary, and how happy are you with the result?
Guildhall was renovated a number of years ago, and it was an okay renovation, but they really didn't deal with a lot of the technologies that are required today in terms of sound systems and visuals. There were a lot of, it was very difficult coming and going out of the main auditorium in terms of, there was no rise. Some of the seats were almost under the stage. It was getting tired, and the galleries themselves were not really sufficient in terms of the art, which is today, which is much bigger canvases, and we had no art storage facility. We had no way to get paintings in and out of the Guildhall except through the front door. So I mean, there were many needs in terms of the relevance and changes of today in terms of dealing with both the theater and the gallery, and it was long overdue. So luckily, we hired Peter Penoyer, who's just truly one of the great architects today. I call him sort of the Stanford White of today, and put all the pieces together. And we ran at a $30 million raise, and we've raised almost all of that money. And we've done it over a series of phases. We finished the galleries, which opened up this past summer, and they're spectacular. They're state of the art. We have art storage field is state of the art. And we have just a much greater opportunity to have major shows with not only our own collection, but the collections of many other of art curators. And the facility in terms of the conference, the concert hall, that was a little bit more of a complex project, but we're holding all true to the original Amor Embry architecture of Guildhall, which was 90 some years ago, but it was really a jewel that he created, and we're keeping all the interior of the inside, but creating a rise, making it easier to get in and out. We got rid of a middle aisle, which really presents much better seating capacity and more space between the seats. And we're going to have state-of-the-art visual and audio, and it'll be an exciting place to see a movie or listen to the opera or go to any performance. And that is going to be reopening on the 4th of July weekend of this year.
That's wonderful. All of us are looking forward to it. I think it was a time. This last year or two has been hard on the community for the lack of Guildhall, and glad that it's almost up. You had an installation out front last weekend about this giant sculpture. Looks like a child's block, but it's been there before. And tell me a little bit about that, and where was it kept in the interim?
I wish that I could give you more information on that. I have to tell you that I was not out there last weekend, so I didn't see it was put out there. And, you know, the Arts Committee is doing a lot of interesting things to generate an enthusiasm for what's going on inside the museum. So I do believe that it is a long-term plan of ours to create a sculpture garden based upon the rules and regulations of East Hampton to create, you know, a much more beautiful outdoor space with various sculptures. And this might have been just a test of that in terms of what we're planning on doing. We now have an outdoor theater. We have an amphitheater on the one side. We've removed a few trees to make it much more accessible to do outside performances. And we're going to try to utilize some of the sculptures that we own and maybe others that will be dedicated to us to create a much more beautiful outdoor space for sculpture. I don't think we're going to be Storm King yet, but I think it's going to be pretty special.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. I know that you were born in Ohio, and that your family owned a Schrafft's chain, which was a restaurant chain and throughout the country, I think. And talk about your growing up and where you went to school and stuff like that.
Well, I would say that I grew up in Cleveland, but from the time I was 5, I knew I wanted to move to New York and probably to the Hamptons at that time. My family was in both the publishing and the advertising business. The Schrafft's business was a job that I had because my family handled the advertising for Schrafft's.
Nice.
Unfortunately or luckily, they didn't own Schrafft's, but it was a job that I had in between undergraduate and graduate school where I managed a Schrafft's restaurant in New York on Madison Avenue at 59th Street. I went to college in upstate New York. I went to Union College, which was just a wonderful school. And then I came to New York, had this interim job, and then went to graduate school at the City University of New York, where I studied global finance and marketing. And I went to work for what was then Gulf and Western Industries, Charlie Bluedorn, in corporate marketing. And I had either the fortune or the misfortune of leading a group of business executives to Iran. And I lived in Iran for almost a year, and I left 3 weeks before the Shah did, before he went to Egypt. And I experienced the country having a nervous breakdown. Pretty extraordinary experience. And when I came back to New York, I went to Mr. Bluedorn and I said, I think that licensing is a wave of the future in terms of brand licensing. And we owned a division called Kaiser Roth, which was a large apparel conglomerate. And I asked the head of licensing if I could become his apprentice. And he said, sure. He said, I only hope you're ever more successful than I am. And it was my first job, and I never looked for a job again. I went from Kaiser Roth to Jordache, ran the licensing. From Jordache, I went to Liz Claiborne, ran the licensing. And then almost 40 years ago, I joined Phillips Van Heusen, or PVH Corp, when it was a $300 million company. And I retired at 68 when it was an $11 billion company. We owned Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger and Arrow and Izod and Van Heusen and many, 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 many brands. And I got to see the world because I ran all of our global marketing, all of our global licensing and branding. And it was quite a great experience. And to be able to travel like that and then to come back and forth to East Hampton was an amazing mix of, what I would say, business and pleasure. Because East Hampton was a place that it was magical. And interestingly enough, in terms of the current experience with Guildhall, I bought an Amar Embry house that was going to be torn down. It used to be on Egypt Lane. And I moved that house over to Buell Lane. And I actually bought a lot from Robin Mulford, who was the Mulford Acres, which, is where we have a lot of these summer functions. And so everything sort of ties together in a nice package. So I saved a house that was probably a house that Amar Embry designed on a napkin for someone back many, many years ago. And interestingly enough, a lot of the details that were in my house are details that are in Guildhall. So interesting story.
Yeah.
So I bought that house. I moved it. I chopped it into 5 pieces. I called it the Project 5 Easy Pieces. It was put back together. And I had that house from 1990 to about 2000. I sold that house and then bought land over in Guild and in Dunalpin, and I built a dream house there, which I've been in ever since then.
What first attracted you to East Hampton long ago?
No, truthfully, I used to go up to Martha's Vineyard in the late 70s and early 80s, and I thought it was pretty special. But coming and going from Martha's Vineyard was really tough. It was, you're behest of the plane travels, lots of difficulties. And during that time, that was during the Reagan administration when there was the air controller strike, and I would wait at the airport 5 or 6 hours to get a plane to go back. So I tried to find a place that had some of the same kind of topography and geography because I just thought it was so beautiful up there. And I thought that East Hampton did. It had bluffs, it has water, it has so much of the same feeling when you drive on so many of the roads. And so it was just an easy transition for me. And, not long after I got to East Hampton, I fell in love with Guildhall and ultimately felt that Guildhall was just a place where I'd like to spend more time and energy. And eventually, I through a series of circumstances, I got on the board back in the early 2000s. And I've been a board member almost ever since then.
What do you like to do when you're out here? Are you out here permanently or almost?
No, I come out at least 3 or 4 days a week, or I was during the height of COVID. I have a trainer. I like to play golf. I like to go for long walks. I like to hike. I like the restaurants. I like to go to the galleries. I like to swim. I like to stay home and read. I like to invite people who've never been out to the Hamptons to show them how fabulous it is and give them little tours. East Hampton is just paradise for me. It's my most favorite place to be in the world.
Yeah,
I think from the day from the time that my jitney takes the turn onto 27 by the pond in going into East Hampton, I get excited. I get stimulated. I get turned on to be a part of the town. And I always say that there are two interesting metaphors. I always say the day that the lights go up at the Metropolitan Opera House and I don't get excited, that's when I shouldn't live in New York anymore. And that's the feeling I have. As soon as that bus takes the turn and I see the pond, I have that same feeling of magic.
And I think, by the way, the pond has had the swans in it for many, many years, and they've recently left. And I found out where they went. I looked it up, and they do not migrate. They seek larger bodies of water in the winter, and they're in front of my house.
Really?
I'm on 3 Mile Harbor Road, and there's 7 or 8 swans out there every day. And I think that's the group that was part of the couple that left the pond.
I think there's also some swans on the lagoon to the left of Main Beach, which is often in the winter it freezes over and go ice skating. But I've seen them over there also.
Yeah.
But I mean they are non-migratory. They stay in their place and they mate for life. And it's kind of wonderful. I know that I gave you some information of a woman who lives across from the pond.
Yes, I haven't had an opportunity, but I'm going to call her up.
But she has photographed and she's written for over 20 years. And she was looking forward to meeting you and speaking with you.
Yes, I'm going to get to her. I will. And when we're about out of time with this podcast, they tend to be about 20 minutes. And I want to thank you for being on it and explaining how the Guildhall project went online. And I'll be in touch with you. We'll talk more, and maybe we'll see each other on the jitney.
I look forward to it, and I'm going to try. And I'm working on getting you to give a talk at the Lotus Club. So it's on my agenda. So we're looking forward to that too.
Great. Thanks a lot for your time. Bye bye.
Appreciate it, Dan. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.